Hey Dottie, how are you doing today?
Doing good.
Okay. I would like first to ask, when were you born?
I was born February 25th, 1936.
And where was that at?
Bryan, Texas.
Bryan, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And where did you live growing up?
Well, when we started out, we lived in the Brazos Bottom. And probably when I was about 5, we moved to Bryan because my dad wanted me to start school in Bryan.
Yes, ma'am.
So I went to Bowie School, which is now a relic. They're getting ready to, I don't know, they were going to tear it down, but I think now they're making offices out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I went there until the 3rd grade. And then my dad needed a better job, so it was during the war. And he went to Houston, and he worked at the Houston shipyard.
Oh, he did?
Mm-hmm. And we lived with my sister, Aunt Josephine.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we lived with her, I don't know exactly how long, but then we finally moved into a house, and it was off of Washington Street, and I went to school in Houston until probably 4th or 5th grade, I'm not real sure. And then we came back to Bryan, and my dad was doing carpentry with your grandfather,
Oh,
Mr. Palisoda.
wonderful.
He worked with him. And, well, actually, we had a store, I guess.
That was my next question.
Yeah, when we first came from the bottom to town, we had a grocery store.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and it was over on Sims Street,
That's the one that,
in downtown Bryan.
the one, would you continue to see people in the bottom, or when you came to town?
Oh
or-
yeah, we had relatives in the bottom. My uncles, my mother's brothers, still lived out there. Your grandmother
Yes, ma'am.
still lived out there, and your Aunt Mary, they all lived in the bottom,
Yes, ma'am.
but we were in town. So we made frequent trips, or they came to see us. But after I came back, well, I said I went to Bowie School, and that was right after the war, and then I continued here until I graduated from
And
Stephen F. Austin.
there's another picture that of you and all your sisters all together. Beautiful picture that I love. Can you tell me, do you remember anything about that picture?
No, I don't. I'd
Okay.
love to see that.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite pictures because y'all are just beautiful. Everybody, when I posted it on Facebook, everybody says, "Oh my gosh!" And I wondered.
Are you sure I was in it?
Yes, ma'am. I think you're standing in the back.
Okay.
What was life like for you growing up, Aunt Dottie?
Well, it was fine. I mean, you know, we didn't have a lot of money, but it didn't really make a difference. I was happy. I was kind of an only child, really, because all my brothers and sisters were all so much older than I was.
Yes, ma'am.
My youngest sister, Virginia Rufino, was 12 years older than me.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of grew up by myself. So I would go over the railroad tracks with my roller skates and go skating, happy as a lark. I could do that for hours on end. I had a bicycle. I didn't get it until I was 9 years old. And I remember I'd ride it back and forth to Bowie School. And I can remember coming home one day and my bicycle got caught in the railroad track in the little ditch beside it, and I went flying. But there was a bully in school, and she was chasing me, so I was trying to get away from her. But I remember sliding and just scratching up
Oh,
all of my leg. But I had a happy childhood, you know. I didn't know that we didn't have any money. It didn't make any difference to me, you know. They always provided. They always had a garden.
yes, ma'am.
Mother raised chickens. So
And this was in town.
this was in town.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Do you remember attending St. Anthony's as a child?
Oh yes. Oh yes. My mother would get me out of bed on Sunday mornings, and we went to 6 o'clock mass. And most of the time we walked. It was not fun. And I'm beginning to think that's why I used to hate having to go to church, because I had those memories of getting up at 6 o'clock. And then, of course, there was Father Bravi
Yes, ma'am.
and Father Peter Villani. They were our pastors. And most of the time they spoke Italian. You know, you didn't understand anything they said, or at least I didn't. The Italians, the old Italians did, and that's who they catered to, I guess.
Yes, ma'am.
But I can remember sitting up in the balcony with a friend of mine on Sundays, and we would sit up there and laugh and cut up. And I remember one time Father Bravi looked up there and he said, like that, looking down those glasses, it scared us. We thought he was going to come up and get us. So we kind of quieted it down after that.
And this relates to St. Anthony's, but when was the first time you realized your ancestors were from Poggioreale?
You know, probably not for a long time, because I don't really remember them talking about it too much.
Yes, ma'am.
My dad was not from Poggioreale. He was from Campobello
Okay.
de Mazzara.
Yes, ma'am.
And I remember him talking a lot, because he would tell stories of them being so poor, you know, that he really never, ever wanted to go back there. I can remember him telling stories about the first time he ever got any shoes. And he said he was like 12 years old or so. And he put those shoes on and he was so excited about it. And he said one evening they were at the supper table and his mother kept saying, I smell something, you know. I said, I don't know what it is, but it smells bad. He said, well, what we discovered, I had put those shoes on. I was so excited about them, I never took them off for 2 weeks.
Were most of the people that you associated with it when you were coming up, were they from either Poggioreale or Sicily?
Yes, they were. They were either from Poggioreale or Corleone.
Yes, ma'am.
Those were the two places, I guess, that were fairly close.
Yes, ma'am.
And it seemed that most of the people who immigrated to the bottom were from one or the other of those two places.
And St. Anthony's was a big meeting spot for everyone that came from.
Oh yes, oh yes. Yeah, that was the heart of the whole thing, you know.
Were you baptized at St. Anthony's?
Yes, I was.
Were you married at St. Anthony's?
Yes, I was.
And most of your adult life and childhood you spent going to St. Anthony's?
Yes, when I got married and he was in the military, so we left. We were gone for maybe 20 years. And then we came back and kind of got reacquainted all again, you know, with everything that had happened during that time. But, yeah, Brian has always been my place.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's where I wanted to come back to.
So, could you tell me what you remember the most about your mom? Can you remember when she was born and, you know, where she grew up?
She was born in Houma, Louisiana. She used to say that all the time, so that's how I knew. I'm not exactly sure how old she was when they came to the Brazos Valley, or what year that was. And I'm really not even sure how long they had been in Louisiana before she was born. I'm guessing not too terribly long. She was born, let me see, I'll have to look here. Terrible, you can't remember your mom's birthday. She was born January the 20th, 1893.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and she passed away February the 8th, 1971.
And do you remember anything about her childhood? Anything about this, any stories she talked about growing up?
Well, she had 2 brothers, I think, and she had 2 sisters that I know of. And I don't really know too much about her childhood. I know that things were really tough back then. And she used to sew a lot. She loved to sew. And from all the hard work that they used to do, I think sewing was her escape. And she would sew when she got the chance, and she loved it. And she used to tell me that she made all of her brothers' clothes, even their underwear. So, But that was a fun thing for her. She loved it.
And she was very talented, wasn't she?
She was. She was. She could make patterns out of newspaper. We would go to town, we'd go shopping, and I just wanted to have a dress that she didn't make. I didn't want a homemade dress anymore. I wanted her to buy me a dress. So we went in one of the shops, and I found this cute little sundress. And I told her, I said, Mom, I want that so bad. And she pulled me over in a corner in Italian. She told me, that costs too much money. We'll go home, I'll make the pattern, and I'll make that for you. That was not what I wanted, but she did that.
Did it turn out good?
It turned out very nice, very nice.
And I've heard stories that, just like you said, she would hold up a piece of newspaper and go to drawing on it. Next thing you know, you'd have a dress.
Yeah,
Is that the...
that's true. She could do that. She didn't read or write English. She couldn't read the instructions in the pattern, but she figured it all out.
But tell me how the Accurso family and the Tadero family got together so much, because there's two sisters married by two brothers, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, one of them was your grandmother,
Yes,
Grace.
ma'am. Yes.
Was Mary, and Grace married Tony and Jasper
Yes.
Tadero. And of course they all lived out in the Brazos Bottom, and we got together a lot. They had let's see, your grandmother had two boys, Jody and Ross, your grandfather. And then I had another sister that had three boys, Frances Campese. And then my sister Mary had boys. All at the time they just had boys. And I was the only girl. And those boys were rough, let me tell you. They could throw rocks, and it was awful. And so I guess I finally figured out how to defend myself. So I got pretty good at throwing rocks. And I remember one time, your grandpa Ross, we were fighting. We used to fight all the time, he and I. And I grabbed his shirt like this and pulled all the buttons off of it. And your grandmother was livid with me. You know, she couldn't believe I did that. Little did she know I was just defending myself. But yeah, we would get together all the time, share things, you know. It was not a bad time. Not a bad time.
So, what did your family do for entertainment during that time?
Visit with family. That was our entertainment. Our cousins, in my case it was my nephews mostly, but I had cousins also. And we visited and got together, had dinner, and it was fun. You know, we enjoyed it. We looked forward to it.
And would that be in town, or was that still in the bar?
Both.
Both.
Mm-hmm. Both.
Go back and forth.
Yeah.
At that time, did Grandpa have his dairy? Or was that later?
He had his dairy. That was after I was grown and
Okay.
married. Yeah. Yeah.
And when you
I don't
said-
remember the year.
You were gone for 20 years with Uncle Bud. Where did you go?
Well, it wasn't Uncle Bud.
Okay.
I had been married twice.
Okay.
So it was with my second husband, with my first husband.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. And we went a lot of places. I lived in Casablanca, North Africa for 2.5 years. It wasn't very nice there at the time because the Sultan was in exile and the Arabs wanted to take back their country. So it was a lot of fighting, and it was, you know, between them and the French. So it was not a good time to be there. There was lots of car bombings, and it just wasn't safe. So most of the time we were restricted to our houses. And one night we were held up by a gunman. So that was scary.
Not bad.
But he did let us go, so I'm still here. But after that, we came back to the States, and later on we were stationed in Germany.
I want to reference a wonderful picture that I found in the Rufino files of the boat that you came from the United States to Casablanca. Do you remember the name of that boat?
I do. Let's see if I can think of it real quick. It was the USS Hodges.
Yes, ma'am.
Uh-huh.
I have that picture. I'll make sure that we
Oh,
refer.
okay. I don't have it anymore, but it's still around.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
And you
It was
made
an
that
army ship, you know, it was, I think at one time it was a very, very nice ship. But when we were on it, it was pretty rusty. 'Cause
And you made that trip by yourself, did you?
I did, I was 18 years old.
You got on
My mother was fit to be tied. She thought that was gonna be the end. She was never gonna see me again. But I did it. I was, I don't know, I guess I was kind of daring and dangerous at the time. That was appealing to me. As 18 years old, you know, you don't know about any danger or anything like that. It was just exciting. So I went from here to New York City. I remember my dad taking me and I got on the train in Hearn. That's when they still had
station.
the train station there. And I traveled to New York, not knowing, you know, that New York was this huge city and you might get lost or anything, but they had it all organized. They met me, so I made it. Then we were taken to the ship, and I think it was 9 days.
9 days.
9 days on the water.
Hmm. And when you got to Casablanca, you stayed in military quarters?
No, they didn't have military quarters at the time. We stayed in downtown Casablanca. We had an apartment. And later on, it got so bad that they brought in mobile homes from Italy and put them on the base, and we were able to move into those, and that's where we lived the rest of the time.
And how long were you in Casablanca?
About 2.5 years.
2.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Then after Casablanca, did you come back to the United States?
Yes, we came back to the United States.
And how long after that did you come back to Bryan?
Well, I didn't come back to, let's see, that was quite a while, actually. Yeah,
And
we
where
didn't
did
come back to Bryan until probably 1973, maybe.
Of your family members that are still alive, who are you closest with, Dottie?
I have to say that since all of my sisters have passed away, my nephews and my nieces have all been a salvation for me.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm very close to all of them. I love them all, and hopefully they feel the same way about me.
Yes, ma'am, I'm sure they do.
But they're my family. Yeah.
So, have you ever made back to Poggioreale? Have you ever made it to Poggioreale?
I have. Mm-hmm.
Tell me about that.
We went. It's been 20 years ago.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. But that was fun. We went on a trip to Italy with some cousins of mine, and she happened to be a travel agent, so she arranged the trip, and it was a wonderful trip. It's probably the best trip I've ever been on in my life. I met second cousins while I was there, so that was a really neat thing, you know, to know that these people were related to me and I never knew them, you know, until we went there. And so we had dinner with them. They wined and dined us. They made their own wine, so they were having fun trying to get Bud, drink more wine, drink more. They were having fun with him, but he loved them, and I think they loved him. He spoke no Italian. They spoke no English. There was lots of arm waving and whatever, but somehow or the other, they understood each other.
Many people that have gone to Poggioreale said they had a sense of being home or a sense of being, you know, close to where their ancestors were. Did you have a similar experience?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It just kind of gives you chill bumps when you're there to know, you know, that your relatives, your grandfather, your grandmother walked these streets and they lived there. And that was before the earthquake.
Yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And then for very far back in your family, as far as you can trace, right? Where people were relatives from you from Poggioreale, correct?
Oh, yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Dottie, are there any stories that you remember about your mom that you can tell us? Any funny stories or any
She was a funny lady. She made people laugh. She was good to everybody. She just had a natural warmth about her, and people loved her. And I think she really loved people. She didn't have an easy life.
Yes,
And in her later years, of course, she was fine. She, could do her sewing and enjoy that. And yeah, I loved my mother dearly. It was hard to believe, when she passed away, that she wouldn't be there anymore when I went home.
yes, ma'am.
That was hard.